Good Thursday morning of the 23rd week. I'm going to read the gospel today, okay? And it's from Luke. This is Christian. What can I say? It's controversial. That's what I want to say. See? Let's just read it to you. Jesus said to his disciples, "To you who hear, I say, love your enemies." This is one of the most famous lines. "Do good to those who hate you. Bless those who curse you. Pray for those who mistreat you." Now, we've had 2,000 years to hear that. Can you imagine what his audience must have? This guy's out of his mind. Be nice to your enemy. Better off whacking him, you see. An eye for an eye and a tooth for a tooth. What do you mean being nice to him? What, are you kidding me? See? The radical ethic of Christianity is to love your enemy. It's a mandate of love. It's not contractual. It's not cutting a deal. You love even those who hate you. Watch what he says. To the person who, it is famous, to the person who strikes you on one cheek, offer the other as well. And from the person who takes your cloak, do not withhold your tunic. Give to everyone who asks of you, and from the one who takes what is yours, do not demand it back. Do to others as you would have them do to you. A famous line. For if you love those who love you, what credit is that to you? Even the sinners love those who love them. And if you do good to those who do good to you, what credit is that to you? Even sinners do that. If you lend money to those from whom you expect repayment, what credit is that to you? Even sinners lend to sinners and get back the same amount. But rather, here's your punchline. Love your enemies and do good to them, and lend expecting nothing back. Then your reward will be great. You'll be called children of the Most High, for he himself is kind to the ungrateful and the wicked. Be merciful, just as also your Father is merciful. This is the last part. Stop judging, and you will not be judged. Stop condemning, and you will not be condemned. Forgive and you'll be forgiven. Give and gifts will be given to you. A good measure, packed together, shaken down and overflowing, will be poured into your lap. This is one of the most famous of all the lines in the New Testament. For the measure with which you measure will in return be measured out to you. And it's extremely controversial because in many ways it's counterfactual. That is, very often generosity is not reciprocated. You see that in marriage. And you also see it in friendships. Many a marriage has failed because one was generous and the other was selfish. And after a while, the generous person falls out of love because there isn't the reciprocity of generosity. Well, I've seen that. Anyone who does marriage counseling will have come across this all the time. It's not unusual. And it's sad because what would create mutuality would be mutual generosity, not givers and takers. And yet you see many a time a relationship is formed between givers and takers. Well, it's just the truth. And in the end, as you judge, you will be judged. In that sense, in the measure with which you measure will in return be measured out to you. If you're selfish, you will end alone. By that measure, you will end alone. And I pastorally have seen it. I have my way of saying that if a person has lived their life in a very selfish manner, the measure is their own self-interest and the lack of generosity. To me, the moment where that's best and most powerfully revealed, and it's in many ways sadly revealed, is at the time of death, when there are no tears, no sorrow, nobody cares. And that's the measure by which you are measured. You didn't care. Now nobody cares about you. In your death, you're quickly forgotten. You're not grieved. You're just forgotten. It's a sad truth. Life is cruel in many ways. You get what you pay for. Doesn't seem it, but in the end it is. And it's not the Almighty, it's not God doing the judging, it's life itself. I'm not seeing it. Anybody, listen to Lily guarding my house. Anyone who's had any kind of experience beyond the superficial in people's lives, ministerially, I'm thinking, or I don't know. I think if I were a therapist, I would know this in spades. Sometimes when there is absence of proper virtue in people's lives, and generosity is a virtue, and instead there is vice, selfishness is a vice, you see the failure of human relationships. Sometimes, and I think it affords initial hope, but then despair. And that is this: often one believes that she or he will change, and they persevere in the effort to help them make a change. And in many cases they do. They're just immature. You see that in young couples, they're immature. But they grow into generosity, you see. But then there is those for whom it is not immaturity, it's selfishness. It's a vice, it's a habit. And a habit that is, in a sense, self-isolating. And leads ultimately, that measure leads to the measure by which you are measured, namely, you're alone. You get what you paid for. I have street language, you got what you paid for. You're only interested in yourself? Okay, that's fine. But you're going to die alone too. I guess that means so much to me, that when someone passes, does anybody care? I jokingly say that about myself, since I'm single, obviously I'm a celibate. When I die, will anybody care? And I got to hope and believe and trust that those whom I have loved and been loved by will care and cry as I cry for them when they die, you see? As I have, put it that way. Poor English on my part. See? As you judge, you shall be judged. As you love, you will be loved. Most of the time, I know cases where spouses have been extraordinarily generous with their partner, with their spouse, and the reciprocity wasn't there. They were in the throes of someone, and they were caught up in vice, the vice of the heart. Not violence, but the vice of the heart, selfishness. And all their generosity couldn't redeem the selfish. I don't know. I hope anybody listening to this doesn't see that in their own lives, because it's an awful lonely way of life. You are living together, but not together. Or even in friendship, when the friendship is merely utility. It's useful. Horrible. Horrible. That's the truth. That's the loneliness of vice. The ancients understood this stuff. Aristotle, why to have a flourishing life, you had to have virtue. In a society in which virtue is essential. A virtuous society. A marriage has got to be a virtuous society. A monastery has to be a virtuous society. Any form of life, being neighbors, has to be virtuous, or it becomes the opposite, manipulative, and even sometimes descends into a sort of emotional violence, distrust, in other words. And it's the truth. You know? And you'll never be happy. You'll never have that eudaimonia, that happiness of heart that Aristotle speaks of, without it being virtuous within the community and in yourself, so that you're not alone, but in the companionship of virtue, and ultimately, in heart and soul, the New Testament, through love, and a generous love, not just emotion, but a commitment of the heart to the well-being and beauty of the beloved. What you care about more than anything else is the happiness of your beloved. Not what you get out of it, what's in it for me, but what's in it for her or him.